Hello, my name's Max and I live off-grid. Many people seem to assume that off-grid living involves something like this, a little cabin in the woods somewhere. And for me it did for a long time. I lived in this little cabin, very cosy it was too. But nowadays, off-grid living, for me at least, means something more like this. This is a home I made from a barn that I got, well, I kind of got halfway through building a barn and then tried to turn it into a house. And this is the result. So let's have a quick look around. I'll show you that off-grid living doesn't mean living like a Spartan. You can have all your mod cons if you really want to. And then we'll see if living off-grid like this is cheaper or more expensive than living on-grid. Let's go inside. Here we are in the kitchen then, with many of the things you'd normally find in a conventional kitchen. So I've got a gas cooker, sink unit, cupboards, pots and pans, everything like that. This here though, this is a wood burning range, and it's a brilliant bit of kit. This is like a Rayburn. This is a Wamsler, this is called. It's a German version. You can cook on here. It's got an oven, there's the firebox in here. Best of all, it's got a boiler on the back, and this provides an enormous amount of hot water. And in the winter, this is going on tick over most of the time, and so I've got constant hot water on the go. I've also got those big cast iron radiators, which I can put in the loop and they can pump out heat. There's also down here underfloor heating set up. So in this room, there's a concrete floor with underfloor heating pipes in it. So this is the first year that I found myself at times, well, oftentimes over the summer, on sunny days like this, with more power than I can use or that I can store. I'll talk at some point about battery storage and how to best get the best bang for your buck, if you like. So what I found is that the nature of lead acid batteries means that a lot of the charging is done by late morning if it's a sunny day. And so from 11, 12 o'clock onwards, the solar panels are making more power than you can actually store. So it's best to actually get on and use some. So in there I've got a washing machine and a fridge. I've also got an immersion heater on the hot water tank. Other things I've got this year is a hot plate here, a double hot plate, which I got quite cheap from Argos. And I can use that to make my lunch. And that way I'm not using any gas, and I'm actually making direct use of the solar. I've also got things like a little travel kettle, because again it's low wattage, relatively low wattage, and that again saves putting on the gas. So in the summertime I'm not really using this. I would use gas for most of my cooking. It's just much more convenient and it saves lighting the fire. If it's a sunny day, I'll have the immersion heater on and that will bring the hot water up, and that's generally enough to keep me going. If I want loads of hot water, or if I want to have a bath or something like that, again I'll light this, and while this is going I might use this for cooking as well. So it's all about having different options. I think it's really important when you live off-grid to have lots of choices. So I've got a gas cooker, I've got an electric cooker, and I've got a solid fuel cooker. And that way you're not tied into any one thing. So if one thing just conks out, or you run out of wood or run out of gas, you've got other options available. Same with the heating system. So initially I put in an underfloor heating because I thought that would be the way to go, and then I realised I couldn't actually afford the power. Afford in the sense that I was having to start the generator every time I wanted to run the pump to use the underfloor heating, and because it takes 6 hours for the floor to warm up, that just wasn't working out. So I put in, took me years to work out how to do it, but eventually I did. I put in a gravity fed heating system, and that works fantastically using those great big cast iron radiators. and best of all, it runs off gravity, which is really reliable and doesn't cost anything. Eventually, when I got all these solar panels that I have now, I then reinstated the underfloor heating, and it pumps are much more efficient nowadays as well. So I put in an A-rated pump instead of the old, whatever it was, dreadful rated pump that was there before, and now I run that as well in conjunction with everything else. So let me get a cup of tea and we'll go over some costs. While I get my cup of tea, it's probably a good time to tell you about the water system that I've got here. When I initially moved here, I dug a well, and that was hard work, and the water that came out of it took a lot of cleaning. It was quite a shallow well, it was about 12-15 foot deep, into a little shelf of rock in the side of the hill here where I knew I could get water. The trouble was, one, it was quite seasonal water, and two, it was full of clay, so it came out pink, and took a lot of cleaning before you could do anything with it. As soon as I built this barn, I started capturing rainwater and never looked back. And now I've got a workshop as well, also capturing rainwater. I have a wild excess of it, so that's why I have a flushing loo. I've got 2 baths, an indoor one and an outdoor bath. I've got a washing machine, and I also irrigate the garden with it, and I'm still throwing this stuff away. There's an insane amount of water. So what I do with the water is it gets coarsely filtered as it goes into the rainwater tanks, and then there's a pump down there in this little utility room. The pump sends the water upstairs to a cold water tank, and that feeds a hot water tank, and then the hot water tank feeds the washing machine, the shower, the bath, and this hot tap here. When I want drinking water, I turn on the cold tap. You might be able to hear a pump kicking in, so that's a direct line. Instead of going through those tanks, it's coming just straight through a ceramic filter. The ceramic filter filters out everything. Ceramic filters will filter out viruses, they're that good. The way this water just boiled to make this mug of tea was by solar power coming through these controllers into the big bank of batteries down here, which I've got 4 big 6-volt batteries all hooked together to make 24 volts. The batteries power this inverter, and the inverter powers the kettle. And what's great about that system is that if there's a cloud goes over whilst the kettle's boiling, it makes no odds. The inverter just supplies power to the kettle. It doesn't care where it comes from, so the power is either coming from the sun or it's coming from the batteries. I'll put all this in more detail in another video if there's any interest in it. So what I've got here is a list of costs as they relate to a friend of mine who was living in Bristol at the time, and I thought it'd be interesting to contrast the monthly costs of living in a house in a city to my costs of living here out in the sticks, completely off grid. So the first one is a car. So she was driving a Volkswagen Polo, and the insurance on that car is about £370, and the tax is £120. Now the only point I'm going to make about the car is that I'm driving a 1967 Land Rover, and the insurance cost of that is just over 100 quid, I think, so a third of the cost, and it's tax free because it's so ancient. The downside is it costs me more money to go anywhere because it's not very economical, but the upside is that the vehicle will potentially last forever, because being an old Land Rover, I emphasise an old Land Rover, it's infinitely repairable, and it can be repaired basically by a monkey, which is why I can do it. So transport, that's how I work the transport. I've also got a motorbike. Again, it's a really old motorbike, nice and simple, that I can fix, and I rebuilt that from the frame upwards just because it was completely knackered. And that's, again, is nice to have a backup. So I've got a car and a motorbike, so I'm not stuck on one thing. I would have a bicycle, but I can't pedal because I've got a damaged knee from a motorbike accident donkeys years ago. If I could pedal, I'd have an electric assist bicycle, and that would be how I got round, and I'd charge that from the solar. Okay, so gas, electric, heat and light, that sort of thing. It's about £100 a month for the city, according to my friend. Here, heat comes from the woodland, so there's not really a cost involved in that. There's an effort involved in that, and this is one of the big points about off-grid living versus living in a house, living on-grid, is that it might not cost you money, but you're going to have to spend time doing things. And I've had people living here that really found that hard in practice. It wasn't as idyllic as I imagined. Now for me it's not a chore. I like chopping wood and I like pottering about in the garden and doing things like that. And I found that if you keep these things going, it's no effort at all, really. It's just you just have to allow for it in your life. And now I've given up my workshop in town and I'm spending most of my time here. It's easy to do that. It's easy just to keep things ticking along. So the heat, for instance, I'm just way ahead of myself with that. I've got, you know, a year's supply of wood out there that's seasoning, because it's one of those things. You've got to chop down the tree, you've got to chop up the tree, split the wood, stack the wood, and then season it. And you've got to do all that, you know, like a year before you want to burn it, if you're going to have a good time burning it. And I'm all about the good times. Gas, I do use gas for cooking, so it's becoming more and more of a backup option. I used to rely on it a lot more. Before I had solar panels, I used to use propane for running the generator as well, so I was getting through it back then. Now I'm using one of the big propane bottles, probably using one of those a year for cooking, so maybe £70 a year, so very little really. I actually use much more propane in the workshop than I do for in the house. When I can, I'm cooking on the hot plate that's running off the solar, and then in the winter I'm doing lots of cooking on that wood burning range, because that's running anyway to heat the home and make lots of hot water. So as far as hot water goes, like I say, I've got an immersion heater in there, so if it's a sunny day I'll put that on, and that puts excess solar power into hot water. And then if I want to, I can also fire up the wood burning range and shut off the heating system, so all the energy in that box goes into the hot water tank, and that's pretty efficient actually. It's generally a builder's bucket worth of wood will give me a tank full of hot water, and what I've done with that tank is wrap it over and over with loads of insulation, and then I've strapped a mattress around it as well to keep that heat in, and that will stay warm for quite a few days. What else we got? Council tax. Yeah, I don't pay council tax. Yeah, we'll gloss over that one. I would actually. I would like to pay council tax, although the only benefit as far as I can see is that they take my rubbish away, which I currently have to deal with myself, and that's not too much of an effort. TV license, I don't have one of those. I haven't had a television. I had a television in 2001 when I was touring with a circus. I had a little black and white telly in those days. Yeah, I can't remember ever having a TV since. I watch television, but I watch it on my... Well, I don't watch television as direct. I don't watch broadcast television. I watch programs on my laptop. Which brings us on to broadband. I do have broadband. I had a dongle that plugged into my laptop, and now what I use is I've got an unlimited contract on my phone, which gives me unlimited internet on the phone, and I can tether the phone to my laptop for a good 30 gig a month or so. And I think that's currently costing me something like £17 a month, but that's a special offer. It's going to go up to 30 something pounds a month in 6 months or so. So when I first moved here, this is one of the things that's really changed since, two things that have really changed since I moved here. One is solar panels got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and until I can basically run my life off of the solar, which is brilliant. The other thing is that the internet has changed dramatically. When I first lived here, in order to send an email, I had to take a walk up the hill behind where I live with my laptop and my mobile phone and try and get line of sight towards Keynsham, Bristol area, which means nothing to you, but nor does the fact I'm pointing north. But yeah, I had to go for a long walk just to send an email. Nowadays there's a 4G antenna over that away somewhere, and most of the time I get a 4G signal here, and I've got more internet than I know what to do with, so that's brilliant. Right, rent and mortgage. Now this is the big one for a lot of people. I don't have either anymore. When I bought this land, it was a piece of wasteland, and when I looked at taking out a loan to buy it, I had nothing. I had no money at all at that point. I was 31 or 2, something like that, and it seemed time to actually do something with my life, something a bit more long term than just larking about. So I looked into a loan, and I just couldn't get my head around the idea of spending 25 years paying off a loan as you do with a mortgage. So I borrowed the money to buy the land as a personal loan over 5 years, and then I ended up putting all the money to pay the legal fees on credit cards. So when I moved here, I had literally nothing. I was completely skint, and to pay that loan off in 5 years was horrible, and I knew it was going to be horrible when I went into it, and I was right. It was brutal. I'm not kidding. There were some weeks when I just had to eat what I was growing in the garden, and you know, if that was potato and beetroot, then I ate potato and beetroot sandwiches all week, and yeah, it was grim, but I got through it, and after 5 years it was done. And it's a hell of a relief to know that you don't have to, you know, whatever happens in life, this is paid for. You know, the land and everything I have is paid for. I don't have any debt, and that means that if I don't earn any money in a given month, which is perfectly possible because I'm completely freelance, if I don't earn any money in a given month, then I haven't earned any money. It doesn't mean that I go backwards, and all the time you have huge outgoings like a mortgage or rent and things like this, if you don't earn any money for a week or two, you start slipping back, and that can be very hard to get back from. So food, when I first lived here, the place was overrun with rabbits, and I did try shooting and eating some of those. I went off it quite rapidly. I have grown chickens to eat. You can do that. I find I can do that as long as I allocate them as eating chickens from the off. That's manageable, and I feel quite good about eating the chickens that have lived here because they've had really happy lives. This is an ideal environment for chickens. I only have bantams, and that means they live in the vegetable garden all year round, and they don't really do much harm, unlike the real chickens, which are quite happy to eat all your plants and dig up everything. So I've done that. Now I've just got a few hens and a comedy cockerel, just as decoration really. They lay the odd egg. I'm not really relying on them, but they're no effort to look after, and and they're quite fun to have hanging around. They're jolly little things. So yes, once I've made a vegetable garden, I could be self-sufficient in vegetables year round if I wanted to, but again, it's how far do you want to go, and so I supplement my food with the vegetable garden. This time of year, all the veg comes from the garden, and that's great, and that will be the case probably until the end of this year, and probably carry on supplying a lot. Things like potatoes I just leave in the ground until I need them. Kale carries on right up until Easter. I've got purple sprouting broccoli in there that will go through the winter as well, and then come back to life in the spring. But I don't mind supplementing that with bought-in food. You know, it's fine. I've saved so much money in other aspects of my life that I don't begrudge going out and buying, you know, things like olives, because I've never got to grow an olive tree. So that's probably about it really. So maybe that's been interesting, maybe it's been useful, I don't know. Maybe it's given you some insight into a possible way of living off-grid. Like I say, I did live in a little cabin in the woods for years, and that was great in its own way. For me now, as an old person, this is better. I have indoor plumbing. It's great. So there we go. If there's any interest in this video, I may make follow-ups going into more detail on various things like the power generation, exactly how the rainwater collection works, things like that. How to get away with building a house without planning permission. We'll see. But yeah, for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again. Cheers, bye.